Energy powers everything. Our homes, our factories, and even our economies. But what happens when a continent built on stability suddenly finds itself at the mercy of an energy giant? As Russia slashes gas supplies, the EU faces a daunting winter. Families worry about heating their homes. Industries brace for closures, and leaders scramble for solutions. The question is, how did Europe get here? And where does it go next? Europe faces a chilling reality. Russian gas, which once supplied over 40% of its needs, is now a trickle. The stakes are enormous, especially as temperatures begin to drop. According to the International Energy Agency, Europe has managed to fill 90% of its gas storage capacity, thanks to record imports of liquefied natural gas. Yet, experts warn that reserves alone won't ensure survival. Dr. Simone Tagliapietra of Bruegel, a leading European think tank, cautions. Europe's gas storage levels are impressive, but they're a buffer, not a solution. The real test comes when demand peaks during a prolonged cold snap. In countries like Germany and Austria, where heating systems are gas-reliant, even minor disruptions could lead to widespread energy rationing. A recent Bloomberg energy report shows that average household energy bills in Europe have increased by 35% since 2021, with Germany experiencing a record €3,800 per household per year for utilities. Meanwhile, industries like aluminum smelting and fertilizer production are scaling back operations due to unsustainable costs. Austria, long dependent on Russian gas for over 80% of its energy needs, found itself in the crosshairs this month. Gazprom, Russia's state-owned energy giant, cited technical and contractual issues for halting supplies. But analysts believe the move is politically motivated. Austria's increasing military support for Ukraine has likely provoked retaliation. Reuters notes that this gas cutoff aligns suspiciously with Austria's decision to endorse stricter EU sanctions against Moscow. This is not just a technical matter, it's a message, says Katya Yafimova, an expert at the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies. Russia is leveraging energy as a geopolitical tool. Austria's government is now racing to secure alternatives, including contracts with Norway and LNG shipments via Italy. However, logistical challenges and costs remain significant obstacles, raising fears that smaller EU nations like Hungary or Slovakia could face similar targeted cutoffs. Please like and subscribe. Your support helps us grow. Thank you. Europe's reliance on Russian gas didn't happen overnight. It was the result of decades of policy choices driven by cost, convenience, and trust. During the 1990s, Gazprom emerged as a reliable supplier, offering long-term contracts at competitive prices. By 2020, Russian gas accounted for nearly 50% of Germany's imports. The irony is that Europe's green energy transition, while reducing coal and nuclear reliance, deepened its dependency on gas, explains Claudia Kempfert of DIW Berlin. Policies like Germany's Energiewende, which phased out nuclear power, made Russian imports indispensable. Additionally, projects like the Nord Stream pipelines were touted as symbols of energy partnership, but later revealed to be vulnerabilities. Critics argue that Europe underestimated the geopolitical risks of tying its energy future to a single supplier. Austria's predicament offers a cautionary tale for the EU. Reliance on Russian gas left Austria exposed, and now its economy is feeling the strain. The Austrian government recently approved a €10 billion energy relief package, which includes subsidies for households and businesses. However, these measures may only provide temporary relief. Simone Tagliapietra of Bruegel warns. Austria's crisis is a microcosm of what could happen across Europe if targeted cutoffs expand. Solidarity among member states will be critical, but existing tensions over resource sharing could undermine a unified response. Neighboring countries like Slovakia, which relies on Russian gas for over 50% of its supply, are watching closely. A failure in Austria could trigger a domino effect across the region. Russia's use of energy as a geopolitical weapon is nothing new, but the Ukraine war has escalated its tactics. Before 2022, Russia was already accused of manipulating gas supplies to pressure Ukraine and the EU. But the scale and intensity of these moves have reached unprecedented levels. One critical example is the 2022 Nord Stream pipeline sabotage, which reduced Europe's capacity to import Russian gas. While the investigation into the sabotage continues, NATO intelligence suggests that Moscow may have intended to send a chilling message to Europe. Critical energy infrastructure is vulnerable to attacks, and disruptions can be inflicted with minimal warning. Gas flow reductions have been strategic, targeting specific nations like Austria to highlight the consequences of supporting Ukraine. This has sown discord within the EU, with some member states questioning whether sanctions on Russia are worth the economic costs. The New York Times notes, Russia's energy strategy isn't just about reducing supply, it's about testing the EU's unity under pressure. The effects are not limited to gas. Ukraine is also a significant transit hub for Russian oil, and disruptions to these flows could impact global energy markets. Russia's energy dominance is a reminder of how tightly intertwined geopolitics and economics have become. The impact of Russia's energy cuts on the European economy has been devastating, and the ripple effects are being felt globally. Rising costs for electricity and heating are forcing businesses to reduce hours or shut down altogether, exacerbating unemployment concerns. The industrial sector has been hit particularly hard. ArcelorMittal, one of the largest steel producers in Europe, recently announced temporary closures of several plants in France and Germany, citing unsustainable energy costs. The automotive sector, traditionally a cornerstone of Europe's economy, is also struggling. Volkswagen Group reported a 15% drop in production in Q3 of 2024, directly linked to higher manufacturing expenses driven by energy shortages. This isn't just about energy prices. It's an economic attack aimed at weakening Europe's global competitiveness, says Sergei Guriev, an economist at Sciences Po Paris. If these trends continue, the EU could face prolonged economic stagnation, threatening its status as a global economic power. The expiration of the Ukraine gas transit agreement is a ticking time bomb. Currently, about 10% of Europe's gas imports flow through Ukrainian pipelines, but the agreement's renewal remains uncertain. Russia has signaled that it will only negotiate under conditions that include sanctions relief, a demand the EU is unlikely to meet. If the agreement lapses, the consequences could be catastrophic for already stressed energy markets. According to Thierry Bro, a prominent energy expert, the expiration of this deal could add a new layer of volatility, potentially driving gas prices up by 20 to 30% in the short term. Ukraine, for its part, has emphasized the strategic importance of the transit route, arguing that its loss would embolden Russia to further weaponize energy. Discussions within the EU suggest that contingency plans are being developed, but alternatives, such as additional LNG imports, may not be enough to offset the shortfall. Europe's diversification efforts have been significant, but they haven't been enough to stabilize prices. One of the main challenges is the surge in global demand for LNG. In 2023, China's economic rebound drove LNG imports to record highs, creating fierce competition with European buyers. As a result, spot market prices for LNG increased by 40% year over year, according to Bloomberg. Another factor is the cost of transition. While Europe has invested heavily in renewable energy, these sources are not yet capable of meeting demand reliably. For example, wind energy production in Germany dropped by 15% in 2023 due to lower than average wind speeds, highlighting the limitations of renewables in addressing immediate energy needs. Infrastructure challenges further compound the issue. While countries like the Netherlands and Spain have sufficient LNG terminal capacity, landlocked nations such as Hungary face logistical hurdles in receiving and distributing imported gas. This imbalance creates bottlenecks, driving prices higher even as supply technically improves. Europe's pivot to LNG has provided some relief, but experts agree it's a stopgap rather than a permanent solution. LNG is significantly more expensive than pipeline gas, largely due to transportation and regasification costs. In 2023, Europe spent over 250 billion euros on LNG imports, a sharp increase from pre-crisis levels. Fatih Birol of the IEA emphasizes, LNG has bought Europe time, but it's not a sustainable strategy. Over-reliance on LNG could leave Europe vulnerable to price shocks in global markets. The logistical challenges of expanding LNG infrastructure also remain daunting. Germany, for instance, is building several new LNG terminals, but these projects won't be operational for another 2 to 3 years. Environmental concerns also loom large. LNG production and transport generate higher carbon emissions compared to pipeline gas, creating tension between Europe's immediate energy needs and its long-term climate goals. While Europe has successfully reduced its reliance on Russian energy, it has created new dependencies. The US now accounts for 45% of Europe's LNG imports, making it the dominant supplier. Qatar, another key player, provides an additional 30%. While this diversification reduces reliance on a single supplier, it creates its own risks. Critics argue that Europe's growing reliance on the US ties its energy security to Washington's foreign policy priorities. If geopolitical tensions between the US and other major powers escalate, Europe could find itself caught in the crossfire. Qatar's role also raises ethical and logistical concerns. While the Gulf state is a reliable energy supplier, its labor rights record and internal political challenges could pose risks to long-term stability. Elena Panova, an energy policy analyst, warns, Europe is swapping one set of risks for another. The question is whether these new dependencies will prove more manageable. The energy crisis has forced Europe to make difficult choices that could undermine its climate goals. In 2023, coal use in Germany rose by 10%, reversing years of progress. Several countries, including France and Belgium, have delayed plans to phase out nuclear power, prioritizing energy security over environmental considerations. According to The Guardian, Europe's 2050 net zero target is increasingly at risk. Andreas Goldthau, a professor of climate policy, explains, the crisis has shifted focus from sustainability to survival. While short-term measures are necessary, the risk is that these temporary compromises become permanent setbacks. Energy security isn't just about keeping the lights on. It's about maintaining geopolitical influence. Europe's vulnerability in this crisis exposes deeper structural issues, including its reliance on external suppliers and its fragmented energy policies. If these weaknesses persist, they could erode the EU's standing as a global power. As Politico Europe notes, an energy-weak Europe is a politically weak Europe. Without a cohesive strategy to address its energy challenges, the EU risks becoming a secondary player in global trade and diplomacy, overshadowed by powers like China and the US. To avoid repeating the mistakes of the past, Europe must take bold steps toward energy independence. This includes accelerating investments in renewable energy, expanding LNG infrastructure, and diversifying imports to include more stable regions like Africa and South America. Strategic reserves will also play a critical role. In 2023, the EU mandated that all member states maintain a minimum of 80% gas storage capacity by the start of winter. Expanding this requirement and improving storage technology could provide a stronger safety net in future crises. The overarching lesson from this crisis is clear reliance on a single supplier, whether it's Russia, the US, or Qatar, is a geopolitical vulnerability. Europe must prioritize energy diversity and resilience, balancing immediate needs with long-term sustainability. Fatih Birol summarizes it best. Energy is no longer just an economic issue. It's a matter of survival, sovereignty, and strategy. Europe's energy crisis is a wake-up call that no nation or region can ignore. The choices made today will shape not only this winter but the decades to come. Will Europe rise to the challenge, or will these energy struggles mark the decline of its influence? We're glad you're enjoying this video. Please like and subscribe. Check out another video that is now on your screen.